I was supposed to be the center of attention at my daughter's wedding, but instead I found myself on the floor. The chair was pulled out from under me, and I crashed to the ground in front of everyone. The worst part? It was my daughter's fiancé who did it. As I lay there, my body aching, I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just looked up at him and said, "Your actions are as cold as this moment." The wedding that should have been about love and joy turned into a twisted display of humiliation. But what happened next would change everything. I had been quiet for too long, but that day everything changed. You see, it wasn't just about falling down. It was about how they had been treating me all along, and how they thought they could get away with it. The more I looked around the room, the more I realized that the people who were supposed to love me were the ones who had been pushing me aside, little by little. It wasn't just the chair being pulled away. It was the years of disregard, the cold shoulders, and the manipulation. Emily, my own daughter, didn't even flinch when I fell. Her fiancé. He smirked as if he had won some small victory. I stood up slowly, feeling the sting of the fall. But more than that, I felt something else deep inside me. It was a sense of clarity, a sense of understanding about who they really were. I thought about all the times I had been ignored, all the moments they had treated me like I was invisible. But not anymore. Not today. As I dusted myself off, I realized that this wasn't just about a wedding or a chair. This was about the years I had spent giving, loving, and sacrificing for them. This was about the breaking point, and I was done being their doormat. The moment I stood up from that fall was the moment I decided to take control. I may have been on the floor in that moment, but I wasn't defeated. I wasn't broken. Not by them. Not anymore. As I stood there, slowly picking myself up from the cold, hard floor, the weight of the moment settled on me like a heavy blanket. It wasn't just the fall, it was everything leading up to it. Looked around the room, my eyes scanning the faces of the people who were supposed to love and care for me. But there was nothing there. No concern. No empathy. Just indifference. Emily was busy chatting with guests, her fiancé standing beside her, pretending nothing had happened. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. How had things come to this? How had the people I had given everything for turned into strangers? I stood tall, dusted myself off, and walked away from the crowd. The wedding was still going on, but I wasn't sure if I could bear to stay any longer. I had been pushed aside for years in subtle ways, in ways that were hard to pin down. The cold shoulder here, the dismissive comment there, and the silence when I needed someone to talk to. But it was more than that, wasn't it? It was the way they all treated me as if I were a burden. My own daughter, Emily, who I had raised with so much love, was now too busy with her new life to even notice me. And her fiancé, Sean, had made it clear from the start that I was an afterthought in their perfect world. I walked into the corner of the room and leaned against the wall, feeling the sting of the fall still in my bones. But there was something else too, something much deeper. A sense of clarity. A realization that I had been letting them take advantage of me for far too long. They thought they could push me around, ignore me, make me invisible. But no more. I had given so much of myself over the years, my time, my energy, my love, and all I had received in return was neglect and indifference. I had spent so many years trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy, but at what cost? Now it was time for me to stop caring so much about their happiness and start thinking about my own. I took a deep breath and straightened up. It was time to take control. I wasn't going to let them push me around anymore. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see how they treated me. As the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point. The fall, the humiliation, it had all been a wake-up call. I wasn't just the mother who had been sidelined. I wasn't just the woman who had been ignored. I was someone who had been overlooked for too long. And I was done. When the reception finally came to a close, I made my way to the exit, my heart heavy but my resolve stronger than ever. Emily called out to me, her voice sweet as if nothing had happened. "Mom, are you leaving already? It's not even late." I turned to face her, my expression calm but firm. "Yes, I'm leaving, Emily. But I'll be back. I'm not done yet." I didn't wait for her response. I didn't need to. I knew what was coming. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. I wasn't going to be the person they thought they could control, the one they could walk all over. I was done. As I walked out the door and into the cold night air, I felt a strange sense of freedom. The pain was still there, but so was something else. A sense of power. A sense of purpose. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me anymore. The fall had been a turning point, but it was just the beginning. I had plans, and they were about to find out just how wrong they had been to treat me like I didn't matter. From now on, I was going to take back my life piece by piece, starting with the one thing they had taken from me, my dignity. The days following the wedding felt like a blur. I couldn't escape the image of that moment when I crashed to the floor, my body aching but my mind racing. It wasn't just about the fall. It was about what it meant, what it symbolized. For years, I had been trying to ignore the small signs, the subtle shifts in how my family treated me. But now it was also clear. I had spent decades trying to make everyone happy. I had sacrificed so much for them, and in return, they treated me like an afterthought, a nuisance. They pushed me aside bit by bit until I was no longer a part of their lives. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. I spent the next few days alone, reflecting on everything. The wedding was the tipping point, but it wasn't the first time I had felt this way. I had been ignored, overlooked, and disrespected for so long that I had almost grown numb to it. But that fall, that humiliation, woke something inside me. I wasn't going to sit back and let them walk all over me anymore. I started planning. It wasn't going to be a quick or dramatic move. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum or cause a scene. No, I was going to do this my way. Quietly. Smartly. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I had already spent too many years giving them the benefit of the doubt, believing that things would get better, that they would finally see how much I had done for them. But now I knew better. I wasn't going to wait around for them to change. I had to take matters into my own hands. I began to observe them more closely. I noticed how Sean always had that smug look on his face, as if he was superior to everyone else. And Emily? She was so absorbed in her own world that she didn't even seem to care about me anymore. I had spent so many years putting everyone else's needs first, but now it was my turn. It was time to reclaim my life. I didn't need their approval or their love. I didn't need to be part of their world anymore. I started taking small steps. I reached out to old friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I began doing things for myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for me, not for them. And it felt good. But there was still a part of me that felt hollow. A part of me that wanted them to realize what they had done, to see the damage they had caused. I wasn't going to let them think they had gotten away with it. So I began to gather the evidence. The subtle manipulations, the little lies, the ways they had tried to control me. I wasn't going to confront them directly, but I was going to make sure they knew I was aware. I didn't need to shout to make my point. I didn't need to make a scene. I was going to let them dig their own grave. The next time I saw Emily, I was calm. I didn't show any anger or frustration. I simply looked at her, and for the first time in years I saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't the person I had thought she was. She wasn't the loving daughter I had raised. She was someone who had used me, taken advantage of my love, and now she was too proud to admit it. But I didn't need her to admit anything. I didn't need her to apologize. What I needed was to take back my power. And that's exactly what I was doing. I wasn't going to play the victim anymore. I wasn't going to wait for them to come around. I was going to make my own path. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. And when they least expected it, I would remind them of who I was, of what I had done for them, and how I had been there for them when no one else was. They had taken me for granted, but they wouldn't do it anymore. I had learned my lesson. And from now on, I was going to live for myself. The days following my decision were a mixture of calm and chaos. On the outside, everything appeared normal, as if I had simply brushed off the incident at the wedding, as if nothing had happened. But inside, I felt like a storm was brewing quietly and steadily. I went through the motions of daily life, not allowing anyone to see how much I was processing. Every moment I spent with Emily and Sean felt like a test of my patience, my strength, and my resolve. They still treated me as if I was invisible. Emily's conversations with her fiancé were full of plans, future vacations, new purchases, everything except acknowledging me. And Sean? He acted as if the fall had been nothing more than an accident, a trivial mistake. He never apologized. Neither of them ever did. That's when I realized how deep their disregard for me ran. They thought I was weak, that I wouldn't stand up for myself. But they were wrong. I had learned to keep my feelings hidden, to play the role of the loving, patient mother, the one who always smiled through her pain. But no more. It wasn't just about the fall anymore. It was about the years I had spent giving and giving only to be ignored when I needed them most. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had overlooked their behavior. Emily, my daughter, had stopped reaching out to me long before the wedding. She would cancel plans at the last minute, claiming she was too busy with her new life, her fiancé. Sean, on the other hand, had never made an effort to understand me. He was charming at first, but I saw through the mask. I saw how he wanted everything to revolve around him and Emily, how he couldn't even pretend to care about my feelings. But I wasn't going to wait for them to change. I wasn't going to beg for their love or attention anymore. I was going to find my own way. I spent a lot of time alone, reflecting on my life and the choices I had made. I realized that I had been so focused on keeping the peace, on maintaining the facade of a perfect family, that I had neglected myself. I had allowed them to dictate the terms of our relationship. But that was over. I reached out to friends I hadn't seen in years. I started doing things for myself, small things like taking a walk in the park, reading a book without interruptions, cooking meals just for me. It was liberating. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for me. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to be done, that I couldn't just walk away from all the years of mistreatment. I had to make them understand. They had to know that I wasn't their punching bag anymore. So I began making plans. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I needed to take action. I needed to show Emily and Sean that I was no longer the woman they could manipulate. The idea of confronting them head-on seemed too dramatic, too obvious. Instead, I decided to play the long game. I began to gather information to keep track of the little things they said and did. I paid attention to their actions, to the way they spoke to me, to the subtle ways they tried to control me. I wasn't going to let them off the hook so easily. The more I observed them, the more I realized how much I had underestimated myself. They thought they were in control, that they could push me around and I would just take it. But they were wrong. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Slowly but surely, I began to take steps to regain my power. I started making decisions that were right for me, not for them. I stopped trying to please them, stopped worrying about what they thought of me. And do you know what happened? They started noticing. First, it was subtle. Emily would make a comment about how I seemed different lately, how I wasn't as eager to please. Sean, too, seemed puzzled by my newfound confidence. But I didn't care. I was doing this for myself, not for their approval. One day, Emily asked me to help her with a problem she was having with Sean. She wanted advice on something, some decision she and Sean were making together. But instead of jumping in, offering my opinion as I always did, I paused. I smiled, but it wasn't the same smile I had always given her. It was a smile that said, "I'm not going to fix your problems anymore." I simply said, "You and Sean will figure it out, Emily. You always do." The look on her face was priceless. She didn't know how to react. I wasn't angry, I wasn't upset. I was simply indifferent. It was the first time I had ever felt like I was truly in control of my own life. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman who had been through too much to let anyone walk all over her. And I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. Emily and Sean might have thought they could treat me like I was invisible, but they were wrong. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to let them silence me anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. And I was going to make sure they understood that, one way or another. It had been a few weeks since I began reclaiming my life, and each day felt like a victory. The quiet moments of reflection were becoming more frequent, and I found myself no longer burdened by the guilt or self-doubt I had carried for years. I had given Emily and Sean enough of my life, enough of my love, and enough of my patience. But I wasn't ready to fully sever ties with them just yet. There was still one thing I needed to do, something I couldn't ignore any longer. I had to make them see who I really was. They had underestimated me for so long, thinking that I was weak, that I would just quietly disappear into the background, but they were wrong. I wasn't just some woman to be tossed aside. I had been a mother, a wife, and a person who deserved more than the scraps they had been willing to offer. I had to make them realize that. I began reaching out to old friends again, those I hadn't seen in years. My conversations were no longer filled with apologies for my family's behavior. I wasn't making excuses for them anymore. I had nothing to prove to anyone except myself. As I reconnected with old acquaintances, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent from my life for so long. It was like the weight of the years had lifted. I no longer felt like I had to defend my relationship with Emily or Sean, or explain why I had been pushed aside. They hadn't deserved my defense, and I wasn't going to waste my energy on it anymore. But one morning something changed. I was in the kitchen making my coffee when Emily called. Her voice was upbeat, but I could hear the faintest trace of tension underneath it. "Hey Mom. I've been thinking about our conversation the other day. Are you free later? Sean and I wanted to talk to you about something important." I hesitated. My first instinct was to ignore the call to keep my distance, but I knew this moment was coming. It had to come. I couldn't avoid the inevitable forever. I took a deep breath and said, "Sure, Emily. What's going on?" She told me they wanted to discuss some family matters, and I knew right away that it wasn't going to be about anything good. They weren't calling to apologize or to make amends. No, they were calling because they needed something from me. And that's when it hit me, this was the moment. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. I wasn't going to sit there, nodding along to their requests, pretending everything was fine. This was my time. I would no longer let them dictate my life. I arrived at Emily's house later that day. As I walked through the door, I could already feel the tension in the air. Sean was sitting at the table, his eyes glancing nervously between Emily and me. They were both trying to put on a mask of calm, but I saw through it. They thought they could manipulate me into doing what they wanted, but I wasn't going to let that happen. Emily began speaking, her words laced with false sweetness. "Mom, we've been talking, and Sean and I think it's time for a change. We've decided that we want to sell the house and move into a new place, and we wanted to ask you if you would consider moving out. We think it would be better for everyone." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, and I could see the discomfort in her eyes. She was waiting for me to react, to break down, to beg her to keep me in her life. But I didn't do that. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of affection. Instead, I just smiled, a small, knowing smile that surprised both of them. "You're asking me to leave my home," I said quietly. "The home I built with your father. The home that holds all of our memories. And you think that's going to be okay?" Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. Sean shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting between us. I could see the panic setting in. They weren't expecting me to stand up for myself. They were used to me being the quiet, passive mother, the one who just took everything without a fight. But not anymore. I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. I wasn't going to let them control my life. I took a deep breath, looking them both in the eye. "I've spent my life taking care of you both. I've given everything to this family, and you think you can just push me out the door without a second thought? Well, you're wrong. I'm not going anywhere. Not without a fight." They didn't know what to say. Emily's face turned red, and Sean looked at her, silently pleading with her to do something. But this wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. I wasn't going to let them use me, treat me like I was nothing. I had spent too many years in the background, too many years pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. And I was done. Emily stood up, her voice shaky. "Mom, this isn't how we wanted this to go. We just thought it would be easier if—" I interrupted her, my voice steady and firm. "No. You didn't think about what I wanted. You never do. But that ends now. I'm not some pawn in your game. I'm not someone you can just push aside when you're done with me." There was a long silence, and for a moment, I could see the realization in their eyes. They knew I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. Emily and Sean sat there, stunned as I turned to leave. I didn't need to say anything more. I had made my point. They would have to figure out how to deal with it. I wasn't going to be their victim any longer. The days that followed were quiet, but they weren't peaceful. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I had made my stand, and now I had to live with the consequences. But I wasn't afraid. I was more certain of myself than I had been in years. I had made a choice, and I knew I couldn't go back. Emily and Sean hadn't responded the way I thought they would. At first, I expected them to lash out, to demand that I leave, to tell me that I was out of touch. But they didn't. They didn't know how to handle my new strength. Emily called me a few days after our conversation. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Mom," she said, her words coming slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I didn't realize how much I had hurt you." I stayed silent. For a moment, I wasn't sure what she wanted from me. She had never apologized for anything before. "I know I've been distant," Emily continued, "and I'm sorry. But you have to understand this whole thing with Sean. It's been overwhelming." I took a deep breath. I had to be careful here. This wasn't about forgiving her. This was about making sure she understood that I wasn't going to fall for her excuses anymore. "I understand, Emily," I said, my voice calm and steady. "But understanding isn't enough. It's about respect. It's about treating me like I matter." She paused, and I could hear the frustration in her sigh. "I know, Mom. But you have to know it's not just me. Sean's been pushing me to make decisions, and I feel stuck." I wanted to feel sympathy for her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. She had to take responsibility for herself. "Emily, you've made your choices," I said quietly. "And now you have to live with them. You've treated me as if I don't matter. As if I'm just here to support you while you go on with your life. But I'm not just here for that anymore. I'm not just going to be a background character in your story." I could feel her trying to find the right words, but they didn't come easily. "What do you want me to do, Mom?" she asked, the desperation in her voice clear. "I don't want to lose you. But I don't know how to fix things." I almost laughed. After everything, she was still asking me to fix it. But I didn't laugh. Instead, I responded with something that felt truer than anything I had said to her in years. "You have to fix it yourself, Emily. I can't do it for you." There was a long silence before she finally spoke again, softer this time. "I'll try, Mom. I really will. But it's going to take time." I wanted to believe her. But I had learned that actions spoke louder than words. I had spent too many years giving her the benefit of the doubt. Now it was her turn to prove that she could be the daughter I had always hoped for. After that conversation, things between us didn't change overnight. But there was a shift. A small one. But it was there. Emily began to make more of an effort. She called more often, asked me how I was doing, and even invited me to dinner a couple of times. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly didn't erase the years of neglect. But it was a start. Sean, on the other hand, remained distant. He didn't make the effort to reach out to me, and I didn't expect him to. He had shown his true colors long ago, and I had no interest in pretending like everything was fine. But I wasn't concerned about Sean anymore. He wasn't the one who needed to change. It was Emily. And as much as I hated to admit it, I could see that she was trying. That's all I had ever wanted, her effort, her recognition of what she had done to me. But I wasn't going to let my guard down completely. Not yet. I had learned that lesson the hard way. For so long I had ignored the signs, ignored the way they had treated me like an afterthought. But no more. I was stronger now, more aware of my worth. I wasn't going to be pushed aside again. As the weeks passed, I continued to rebuild my life. I focused on myself, on the things that brought me joy. I spent more time with my friends, rediscovered hobbies I had long forgotten, and even took a small trip on my own. I realized that I had spent too many years living for others, and now it was my time to live for me. I had learned how to stand up for myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. One evening, Emily invited me over for dinner. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I went. When I arrived, she was waiting for me with a glass of wine and a warm smile. "I'm glad you came," she said, leading me to the table. The conversation was light, filled with small talk, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were connecting. It wasn't a perfect dinner, but it was real. And it meant something. As I left her house that night, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild our relationship. It would take time, but it was worth it. I had learned to stand up for myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small again. Not Emily, not Sean, and not anyone else. I was taking control of my life one step at a time. The days seemed to stretch on, each one feeling longer than the last, but something had shifted within me. I was no longer the woman I had been. The old me, the one who had always put others first, had been replaced with someone stronger, someone who understood the value of standing up for herself. It wasn't an overnight transformation. It was gradual, like a river carving its way through rock, slow and steady, but inevitable. The first few weeks after that dinner with Emily were filled with small victories. I no longer second-guessed my decisions or worried about how others would perceive me. I took control of my life, and that felt powerful. I had never realized how much I had been holding back, how much of my own happiness I had sacrificed for the sake of others. But now I was free. I was no longer bound by the expectations they had placed on me. They had all assumed I would just quietly accept everything they threw my way, that I would bend to their will. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't going to be anyone's doormat anymore. One evening, as I sat at home reading a book, the phone rang. It was Emily again. This time her voice was different. Not the hesitant tone from before, but something more genuine. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking. I don't want things to be like this between us anymore. I know I've hurt you and I want to make things right." I paused for a moment. This wasn't what I had expected. I had braced myself for more excuses, for more of her guilt-driven attempts to make me feel sorry for her. But this was different. This was the first time in a long time that she had taken full responsibility for her actions. "Emily," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I appreciate you saying that. But it's not about just making things right. It's about respect. It's about you understanding how your actions affected me." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and I could feel the weight of my words sinking in. "I know, Mom," she finally said. "I understand that now. I've been selfish and I'm sorry. I don't want to lose you. I know I've already pushed you away, but I'm asking for another chance." Her words weren't perfect, but they were sincere. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't sure if things would ever be exactly like they had been, but I knew that the relationship we had was worth fighting for. "Emily," I said softly, "it's going to take time. I'm not going to pretend that everything is okay overnight, but I'm willing to work on this. I want us to find a way back to each other." Over the next few months, things between Emily and me began to slowly improve. She made more of an effort to include me in her life, to ask for my advice, and to show that she cared. It wasn't perfect and there were still moments of tension, but there was progress. I started to feel like my daughter was coming back to me, that the person she used to be was still there, buried beneath the surface of the woman she had become. Sean, on the other hand, remained distant. He didn't make the effort to reach out, and I didn't expect him to. I wasn't going to waste my energy on someone who hadn't earned it. I had learned that lesson the hard way. Emily's changes were enough for me. I had spent so many years trying to fix things, trying to make everyone happy, but it was clear that the only person I could change was myself. I had to accept that Emily was the one who had to make the effort if we were going to have any kind of relationship. But even with all the small improvements, I knew something important was still missing. I had to prove to myself that I had the strength to let go of the past, to forgive but not forget. I wasn't going to allow myself to be hurt again, and I wasn't going to be someone's second choice anymore. One afternoon, Emily invited me to a family gathering at her house. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I decided to go. As I walked into the room, I was surprised by how much had changed. The air was lighter, less tense. Emily greeted me warmly, and Sean was there too, though he remained distant. I could tell that things were different between us, but there was still a wall between us. I wasn't sure if that wall would ever come down, but I didn't need it to. What mattered was that I had regained my strength, that I had found my voice again. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had my own approval, and that was enough. As the evening wore on, I found myself enjoying the small moments, the laughter, the conversations. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally on the path to healing. I had spent years putting their needs above my own, sacrificing my happiness for theirs. But now I was living for myself. I was no longer just a mother, a wife, a daughter. I was Linda. And that was enough. I didn't need anyone else to tell me who I was or what I was worth. I had already figured that out on my own. The weeks passed, and slowly, things began to settle into a new rhythm. Emily had started making more of an effort, reaching out regularly, inviting me to dinner more often, and even sharing little details about her life that she had once kept to herself. But despite the changes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. It was like there was this invisible barrier between us, a wall I couldn't quite break down, no matter how much we tried to move forward. I wasn't angry anymore, not like I had been before. But there were still moments when I wondered if things would ever truly go back to the way they were. Emily was trying, I could see that. But the damage had been done, and even though she was making an effort now, there were still times when the pain from the past crept up. There was a lingering bitterness that I couldn't fully shake. One afternoon, a few months after our first real conversation about everything, Emily called. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I agreed. When I arrived at her house, she greeted me with a warm hug, a sign that things had definitely changed. But the moment we sat down, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She had something on her mind, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot," Emily began, her voice wavering slightly. "I know I can't undo what's happened. I can't take back the hurt and I can't change the past. But I want to really try to be the daughter you deserve. I don't want you to feel like you're invisible in my life anymore." I sat there taking in her words. For so long I had wished for this moment, wished that Emily would finally see the pain she had caused, wished that she would acknowledge the years of neglect. And now here she was saying the things I had longed to hear. But something inside me still held back. I wasn't ready to forgive her completely, not yet. It wasn't that I didn't want to, it was just that I had to protect myself. "Emily," I said softly, "it's not about just saying the words. It's about showing up day after day. It's about consistency. I've spent so many years putting you and your father first, but I've learned that I can't do that anymore. I can't keep giving and giving without something in return. I can't let myself be treated like I don't matter." She nodded, her eyes filled with understanding, but I could see the sadness there too. She knew she had hurt me, and she was finally starting to realize the depth of that hurt. "I know, Mom. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I'm asking for a chance. A real chance. I want to make it right. I don't want to lose you." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years press on my chest. I wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive her, but I realized something in that moment. I didn't have to. Forgiveness wasn't about her, it was about me. It was about releasing the anger, releasing the hurt, and letting go of the pain that had been holding me back. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing this for myself. "I'm not sure, Emily," I said, my voice steady, "but I'm willing to try too. I'm willing to see if we can rebuild. But you have to understand it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. And I'm not going to be the one to make all the effort anymore. You need to meet me halfway." She looked at me, and for the first time in a long time I saw the daughter I had raised. The one who was kind, thoughtful, and loving. "I understand, Mom. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to make it right." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. And that was enough. I didn't need everything to be fixed all at once. What mattered was that Emily had acknowledged her mistakes, that she was finally seeing me for who I was, not just as her mother, but as a person. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I also knew that I wasn't the same woman I had been. I wasn't going to let anyone push me around anymore. Not Emily, not Sean, not anyone. I had learned my worth, and I wasn't going to give that up. The next few months were filled with small but meaningful changes. Emily and I spent more time together, and Sean started to be more civil, though I knew the distance between us was still there. I didn't expect him to change, not like Emily. But I didn't need him to. What mattered was that Emily was trying, and that was enough for me. Slowly, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years: peace. I wasn't at the mercy of their actions anymore. I was in control of my own life. And that was a powerful feeling. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized how far I had come. It had been a long, painful journey, but I had made it. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to lose it again. The future was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone take my power away again. The months continued to pass, and although I had found a new sense of peace, there were still moments when the weight of the past would resurface. Emily and I were still working through the awkwardness, but something had shifted. She was more present now, more thoughtful in the way she treated me, and I found myself slowly letting my guard down. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when I would catch myself wondering if it would last, if it was just a temporary change or if things would fall back into the old patterns. But for the first time in a long time I felt hopeful. One afternoon, Emily invited me to her house for a small family gathering. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a casual dinner with a few close friends. I had come to realize that these were the moments that mattered. Not the grand gestures, not the promises, but the small everyday moments that showed me that she truly cared. As I walked into her house, I could feel the difference. The atmosphere was warm, inviting, and for once it felt like a real family gathering. Emily greeted me with a big hug, something that had been missing for so long, and I couldn't help but smile. Sean was there too, though he still kept his distance, but I could tell that there was a change in him as well. It was subtle, but it was there. I didn't expect him to suddenly become the perfect son-in-law, but the tension between us had lessened. Over dinner, Emily and I chatted like we used to. It was lighthearted, full of laughter and shared stories. Sean even joined in on the conversation, though it was clear that his comfort level wasn't quite there yet. I didn't push it. I knew that it would take time for everything to feel normal again. But for the first time, I felt like we were heading in the right direction. After dinner, Emily pulled me aside. "Mom," she said, her voice a little softer than usual, "I know things haven't been easy, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm really trying." I looked at her, searching her face for any hint of insincerity, but there was none. "I know, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "I see it. And I appreciate it." There was a long pause, and for a moment neither of us spoke. But in that silence I knew that we had come to an understanding. We were both trying, and that was enough. As I left her house that evening, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. I had spent so many years chasing after approval, trying to make everyone happy, and in the process I had lost sight of myself. But now I was different. I had learned that my happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else. It wasn't about Emily or Sean. It was about me. I had found my voice again, and I wasn't going to let anyone silence it. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There were still many things left unsaid, many feelings left unaddressed. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid to speak my truth, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my own well-being. I wasn't the woman I had once been, the one who had quietly accepted everything life threw at her. I was stronger now. I was Linda, and I would no longer be invisible. I would no longer let anyone walk all over me. The future was still uncertain, but I was ready for whatever it held. I had learned to live for myself, and that was the most important lesson I could have ever learned.